Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and as always, I'm joined by my ammonia-based co-host, Scott Daly. Scott, make chromatic chimes for everyone.
This is not fair. You didn't tell me I was gonna have to perform. Um,
Just,
what's a chromatic chime sound like?
just, just make some delightful chords with your carapace.
Wait, I got it. I got it. I don't know if anyone could hear that. I don't think you could hear it.
I,
I
okay, I
just
heard it.
I just played the baseball noise. All right. Hello, everyone. That was a fucked up intro. I am running off of my new computer, and so things are a little bit screwy this evening, but we're doing okay, Matt. We're doing okay, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm down in my secondary podcasting location.
Yeah,
So
we both changed a lot of stuff since the last time we met, which has resulted in some fun times. But I think we're good now.
yep,
Hello, everyone. We see a bunch of people in chat. I see John, Kirkistan, Bishop, Nandy, Metathulu, Chris. All our usual friends are here. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you,
yep,
first of all, before we get started, for bearing with us as we had to delay this a week due to some unforeseen problems and illnesses the last couple weeks.
yeah. There was a gastrophage infection
Yeah.
in my fuel tanks.
Are you gonna be doing that all night, man?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think everyone in chat that I see right now is people that I recognize. So I don't know if there's anyone speaking in chat that doesn't know who we are. But if you're lurking there in the background, we just wanted to say hello and welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure like that you know who we are, but in case you don't, we are Doof Media, and we make podcasts, which are those things that you listen to in the car on your way to work, all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this here monthly book club. Matt, what is a book club?
Well, what happens here is each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That is right. And then we gather here on the last Friday of the month, or sometimes a week after that, when we have to delay the schedule and spend a couple of hours discussing the book. We will pull some slides about interesting moments and kind of just lead a group discussion about this book and the story. And it's a fun time. We hope you stick around if you just wandered in here by mistake. But Matt, what book are we talking about this month?
This month we're talking about Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and the summary is as follows. Ryland Grace is the sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission, and if he fails, humanity and the Earth itself will perish. Except that right now he doesn't know that. He can't even remember his own name, let alone the nature of his assignment or how to complete it. All he knows is that he's been asleep for a very, very long time, and he's just been awakened to find himself millions of miles from home with nothing but 2 corpses for company. But thanks to an unexpected ally, he just might have a chance.
Wow. That's a pretty good summary, actually. I like that a lot.
It's all, I had to cut a paragraph out of the middle of it because it
Oh,
was
did
like
you?
kind
Okay.
of going on and on, but yeah, it was fine. It's fine.
Awesome. So that is Project Hail Mary. It's our book for this month. But before we really get into Project Hail Mary, we did want to do our thing about next month's book. For those that don't know, as Matt said, we have a poll over on Patreon to decide what book we're covering each month. That poll usually runs the week leading up to that current month's book club. And then what we do is we take the results of this poll, we combined them with the results of the poll that happened right now as we are talking. We add those numbers together and we decide what book we are doing next month. So here is the poll from Patreon. Here's how it stands right now. The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie has a pretty good lead right now, but you can change that if you want to. So right now I am going to share in the chat, in the Google chat, a link to the straw poll. You will be able to vote for 2 books in this straw poll. And you can help decide what we're covering next month. So will it be the Forever War? Will the Forever War mount a comeback, or will it be the Blade itself? Or will the Water Knife somehow, inexplicably, just zoom up there to the top? I don't know. We'll see. That voting
We'll
will be
see.
open all book club long. So if you join late and are listening to this a 10, 20 minutes into the future, you can still vote, and you will be able to vote until we are finished. So with that out of the way, Matt, let's talk about Project Hail Mary. All right.
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right. So the way this kind of works normally, and I see Adam, we have someone new. Adam, I think. Is this your first book club, Adam? I'm not sure. I'm usually pretty good with the names, Matt, but if it's not your first book club, sorry. If it is, hey. All right. So usually how this works is Matt starts us off by telling us what he thought of the book, and because there's a slight delay in what you're hearing versus what we're seeing, that is when you guys start filling in with what you thought of Project Hail Mary, and then when we're done with Matt, we'll get to you folks. So Matt, I already know the answer to this, obviously, but what did you think of Project Hail Mary?
I found it utterly delightful. It surprised me because like I didn't hear like, oh, this book is so fun, you know. I didn't hear much about it at all, really. And in the end, I enjoyed this, I think, significantly more than I enjoyed reading The Martian.
Interesting.
I feel like Andy Weir has grown as an author since he wrote The Martian. I think that the inclusion of the sidekick into the dynamic of, lone stranded astronaut type guy tries to solve problems plus cool alien sidekick is much better than just lone astronaut tries to solve problems by himself. I thought the flashback technique was interesting. I think we'll have a lot to say about like where that worked, where maybe it didn't, and then in my opinion, I think kind of where it justified itself. Overall, found it very like emotionally impactful too. Like I was honestly totally taken off guard by how much I fell in love with Rocky and just what a great dynamic it was between those characters. So yeah, overall, extremely positive. One of the most fun I've had reading a book in a while. Back to you, Scott.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think we said this at the end of last month's book club, but The Martian was the first book you and I recorded a podcast about ever.
Yeah.
And it is a podcast that you will never hear because it was our like test run. We both read The Martian and we wanted to talk about it, and we decided to do like a test run book club to see if this podcasting thing was something we were going to want to keep doing. And so I think I don't remember who else was there. Was my sister there? I think Cindy might have been there. I don't remember.
I think so. She
Yeah.
was there for some of the first ones for sure.
So we recorded that, and it's gone. It's not even that we're holding it back from you. The audio is literally gone. I have no idea where it is. And I enjoy The Martian quite a bit. I thought that was a fun book to read, and I agree with you. I think this is overall a better book. I think it is a very consistent book as well. I think if you've read The Martian, you will know kind of exactly what style and type of book you're getting into here. Andy Weir writes in a very specific kind of way, and I wouldn't say like I'm in love with his prose. I think he writes very he takes complicated things like and complicated science and simplifies it in a way that is entertaining and enjoyable to read. But I didn't find a lot of like I'm trying to think of a way to say this without sounding mean, but like there was never any moment where I was like, oh wow, that was a beautiful way of putting that, or that the way you structured that sentence really impacted me. I think the story is very impactful and emotional, but I think the beat to beat prose, like I mean, we just talked about Brandon Sanderson last month, a book that I didn't care for very much, but I think he's like from a prose perspective, I think he's a much more talented writer than Andy Weir. No shade on Weir. I think Andy Weir would probably say, oh, you're comparing me to Brandon Sanderson? Yeah, no, you're totally right. But the thing I love about this book, and the thing I think it works the most on, is the way in which Weir explains science in a way that doesn't ever make me feel frustrated or bored. I think he does it in this really way where he simplifies it in a way that's like you're reading Wikipedia articles about really complicated science stuff, and you get just enough of it to understand what's happening, but not too much to where you get a little bit bogged down in it. I think there were only a couple moments throughout the course of the book where I really felt, okay, we're getting a little bit bogged down into this stuff, Andy. Like maybe we could step back, and I forget exactly when those moments were, but there were a couple moments where I was like, okay, I kind of want to just flip past the details of your experiment that you're doing here. But for the most part, I found the science very engaging and building up part of the mystery of what's going on here and what's he trying to do and what is the astrophage and how are they going to solve this problem. It was very, very enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the thing about both The Martian and this book is they're basically both written in the voice of the character, and both of the characters are fairly similar people,
Mm-hmm.
and so both of the narrative voice ends up feeling very similar.
Yeah.
I guess I would argue that Grace is actually different from Watney in some important ways, but maybe we can talk about that later. But I think that's maybe part of why the prose style doesn't really pop is because it's almost like just the kind of running inner monologue of this specific character.
Yeah, in
Um,
some ways it felt like reading a blog. And I don't
mhm.
mean that like I don't think that's bad. I think that's the style that Andy Weir was going for here. But like if you go to reading, if you go to novels for like beautifully crafted language, I just don't think that's necessarily what you're going to get here. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um so it seems like everyone in chat really enjoyed this book as well. Nandy says, I don't read a lot of sci fi, but man, this was a treat. I accidentally finished it in a day. John also read it in one sitting, which is surprising because this is not a short book. I mean, it's
yeah,
not super long, but I think it's like 350, 400 pages. So
yeah. That's
not,
funny. Yeah,
it's a fast read, but it's not a short read.
yeah. Kyrgyzstan read it in one sitting as well. That's funny because I thought I read it fast, and it took me a few days of audiobook listening.
That's amazing.
Which the audiobook is really well done too. Um, yeah. Jake agrees that it was better than The Martian.
Hmm.
Um,
Chris says it's a book of high and lows for me. I had trouble with the first 100 pages, almost gave up on it, but basically as soon as Rocky showed up, I flew through the pages and loved it. Yeah, I think it's so funny that we're like building up to the book it becomes once Rocky shows up, which is almost a completely different book.
mhm. Yeah, I didn't struggle that far, but I did struggle with like the actual opening, like the actual opening bit where he wakes up and he doesn't know what the hell's going on. Actually, maybe we can just get into talking about
Let's
the
just do it.
opening.
Let's just do it.
Yeah, all right. So the book begins with the beginning of the book. Um, our unnamed protagonist wakes up in confusion. What's 2 plus 2? Something about the question irritates me. I'm tired. I drift back to sleep. A few minutes pass, then I hear it again. What's 2 plus 2? The soft feminine voice lacks emotion, and the pronunciation is identical to the previous time she said it. It's a computer. A computer is hassling me. I'm even more irritated now. I say. I'm surprised. I meant to say, leave me alone, a completely reasonable response in my opinion, but I failed to speak. Incorrect, says the computer. What's 2 plus 2? Time for an experiment. I'll try to say hello. Oh, I say. Incorrect. What's 2 plus 2? What's going on? I want to find out, but I don't have much to work with. I can't see, I can't hear anything other than the computer. I can't even feel. No, that's not true. I feel something. I'm lying down. I'm on something soft, a bed. I think my eyes are closed. That's not so bad. All I have to do is open them. I try, but nothing happens. Why can't I open my eyes? Open. And open. Open, dang it. Ooh, I felt a wiggle that time. My eyelids moved. I felt it. Open. My eyelids creep up, and blinding light sears my retinas. Boom, I say. I keep my eyes open with sheer force of will. Everything is white with shades of pain. Eye movement detected, my tormentor says. What's 2 plus 2?
So yeah, kind of talk to me, Matt, about your problems with the opening pages of this book and kind of the opening setup structure, I guess.
I mean, basically, I just found it a little frustrating. I was lost. There wasn't much to grab onto. You could say like, oh, you're supposed to feel that way because that's how the character feels, and it's like not. No, I didn't really feel like the character feels. I felt annoyed that I couldn't figure out what was going on in a book I was reading, and the character felt panicking that they were waking up in some weird situation. Eventually, like pretty quickly, the book connects enough for you to be like, okay, there's like a mystery here. What's going on? And then I think the first moment that I kind of got it was when I was like, oh, he's on a spaceship. Like because of things he's talking about with like moving being really hard and so forth. You're like, okay, he's on a spaceship and there's extra G force and like you start putting things together and then like I feel like once he engaged my mind in like the puzzle solving mode, then he kind of had me for the whole rest of the book, honestly. Which didn't take all that long. It was really probably just a few pages, the first few pages where I was just like, Where are we going with this, Andy? Um,
Yeah, see, that's so interesting to me because I think I was kind of sucked in right away. I know
yeah.
another one of our listeners said that the first 100 pages or so was rough for them before Rocky came in, but that was not my experience at
Mm.
all. My experience was I was in kind of from page one. I think just the how tantalizing the mystery is. I think kind of just got me on board right away. And I like what you said about the realizing it's harder to move and kind of the slow realization that gravity is a little bit higher here, and so he must be on a spaceship and blah blah blah. I think that's one thing that Wier does extremely well. Actually, I think he did it well in The Martian, but he also does it really well in this book. This is a very smart book with some very smart things going on and some very smart characters solving problems. The cool thing that he does is he dangles the solution in front of you in a way that allows you to maybe figure it out moments before the character figures it out, but not in a way that feels like they're intentionally making the character dumb, but just in a way that like the evidence is being presented to you and just your powers of knowing you're reading a book are allowing you to digest and dissect information maybe a little bit slightly faster than the characters. And so it always has this moment of like, oh, I figured it out, and then
Mhm.
the character figures it out moments later, and then so you have this constant like satisfaction loop of yes, I figured it out and I was right. And this happened to me a few times throughout the book, and I think it's very intentionally designed that way. I think one of the first things when we realize, oh, the astrophage is over there, and for some reason it's not taking over fully over here. And then like in the back of my mind, the first thing I said is, oh, someone's probably eating it. And then of course that ends up being exactly the thing. And I just love how Wier does that because it's the way this book doesn't ever make you, the reader, feel dumb. I am not a scientist. You are. I don't have I know very like cursory, as I said, Wikipedia level understanding of a lot of this stuff. And I never felt dumb when reading this book. I think the way the book is written, the way it introduces the information to you, and the way it kind of you watch the character as he beat by beat problem solves never makes you feel stupid. And I think that's really great.
Yeah, I think that's one thing it has over The Martian, by the way, because like The Martian would it was a lot more of Mark Watney being like, all right, I figured it out. Here's 8 pages where I explain how I'm going to make water out of rocket fuel or whatever. And this book does it backwards, where he leaves the clues around, he leaves the breadcrumbs
Mm-hmm.
in the story, and he kind of just weaves them into the storytelling, and then um, maybe gestures in a direction very subtly, but it's enough for you to make guesses at least. And that's the fun part for me is like my guesses weren't always right. There were a few times where I was like really sure that the answer to some particular problem was going to be one thing, and then when it turned out to be something else, I didn't feel like upset or anything. I was like, oh yeah, man, I could have seen that coming, right? It felt very fair,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, yeah, I guess I see why that answer is better than the answer that I came up with, which it just yeah, like it's funny, like it's almost I use the word it felt fair. I didn't even think about this, but like that's the word we use for like a detective story. Like it has to feel fair, like you could have figured it out yourself.
Yeah.
And generally, that is what this book does.
Yeah, I mean, this book presents science as if it's kind of a mystery, right? And it's like we have theories and we chase down evidence and we try to solve the mystery. And that's exactly what it is. And I love here, like we haven't talked much about this page specifically. I love here that like the first thing we understand about Ryland Grace before we even know his name is he's that problem solving type of person, right? Like the first thing he does here is, okay, what's going on? I gotta figure this out. Okay, I'm lying on something. It's soft, probably a bed. Like he's just like naturally goes into that. Okay, let's figure this. Let's add up evidence. Let's figure stuff out. I'm gonna try an experiment. I'm gonna open my eyes. Like like it's just like it immediately establishes as this type of person, and that's how he approaches every problem he comes across all throughout the book.
Hmm. Which is really fun, right? Like I love books that sort of embody a certain type of human.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's funny because when he's during the flashback sequences, there are a few moments where he's like why do people listen to me? I'm just like some guy. I'm not a genius. And it's like the book's answer is kind of like, yeah, I mean, I don't think Ryland Grace is supposed to be a genius. I think Ryland Grace just embodies this unquenchable spirit of like asking questions and then performing small experiments to try to figure out the answer as like part of his DNA practically,
Mm-hmm.
and we see that from the very opening page where he's like, okay, I can't move, I can't see. Let me try some experiments, right? He is the scientific method personified, and that's why he wins, and that's just delightful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's a lot of fun. Speaking of that flashback structure, though, do we want to move on
Sure,
and talk about some of that?
sure.
All right. So in this next, and I think our things in the corner, Matt, are just going to be messed up. So we'll just have to
Are
remember
they?
that the yeah, that's my fault.
Oops. Okay.
For those that don't know, you can't see it, but in the little corner of the slide over here is an M or an S, and that's how we know whose slide this is supposed to be. But this is definitely mine, and it's got an M on it, so I'm panicking right now.
Oh no.
But this slide we're talking about here is when Grace gets his first look at the astrophage, and I wanted to use this to maybe talk about these little things in general, and then also kind of talk about the structure of the flashback sequences that happen in this book. They live on the sun, she said, so they're a life form. I'm pretty sure they are. Yeah. Elaborate. Well, they move around. It's plainly visible through the microscope. That alone doesn't prove they're alive. Inert stuff moves around all the time, from static charge or magnetic fields or whatever. But there was something else I noticed, something weird, and it made the pieces fall into place. Okay. I put a few dots under a vacuum and ran a spectrograph. Just a simple test to see if they emit light. And they do, of course. They give off infrared light at the 25.984 micron wavelength. That's the Petrova frequency, the light that makes the Petrova line. I expected that. But then I noticed they only emit light when they're moving. And boy, do they emit a ton of it. I mean, not a lot from our point of view, but for a tiny single-celled organism, it's a ton. And how is that relevant? I did some back-of-the-napkin math, and I'm pretty sure that light is how they move around. Strat raised an eyebrow. I don't follow. Believe it or not, light has momentum, I said. It exerts a force. If you were out in space and you turned on a flashlight, you get a teeny tiny amount of thrust from it. I didn't know that. Now you do. And a teeny tiny thrust on a teeny tiny mass can be an effective form of propulsion. I measured the dot's average mass at about 20 picograms. That took a long time, by the way, but the lab equipment is awesome. Anyway, the movement I see is consistent with the momentum of the emitted light. She set her tablet down. I had, apparently, accomplished the rare feat of getting her undivided attention. Is that something that happens in nature? I shook my head. No way. Nothing in nature has that kind of energy storage. You don't understand how much energy these dots are emitting. It's like getting to the scale of mass conversion, E equals mc squared kind of stuff. These tiny dots have more energy stored up in them than remotely makes sense. So, Matt, this is the opportunity I give you to nerd out about all this astrophage stuff. So go ahead. It's time. All the scientists in the chat, you too, go. Just go.
Yeah.
Just go.
I mean, honestly, it's gonna be more the Star Trek nerd in me that geeks out here because the thing is, it is that fun thing where you take one thing that's impossible or has no explanation, and then you incorporate it systematically and consistently into the existing scientific worldview. Because it's like there is no really conceivable way that like an organism made out of like carbon and nitrogen and hydrogen and oxygen could like metabolize light into mass by fusion. Like it's like not it's like physically allowed, but it's like I don't like there's no way you could do that though. But then you just say shut up. We're assuming that you can do that. You can this is a creature that doesn't just photosynthesize. It actually does mass energy conversion. And then he's like, okay, let's take that seriously. What else would be true? And then he comes up with all this other fun stuff where it's like, okay, well, if it could do that, then it could re-emit the light as a form of propulsion. It would obviously be black because it would be a perfect black body because it absorbs all light that hits it. It would be you could use it for propulsion. Like you just start riffing, right? And it's all based on the one sort of conceit of the idea, and
Yeah.
that's the fun part, I guess. As a scientist, like that's the fun part for me is he's taken this one thing that's probably impossible, but he's like thought it through so systematically and integrated it into the picture of everything else that we know in a way where you're just like, yeah, that is how that would work. And that's really fun to think about.
Yeah, I agree. I like that particular kind of science fiction where John's calling it the one big lie, right? This you do this one thing and you establish this one thing that is not true, or we don't know it's true, and then go crazy with it, and that's when you can get really hard with your science, right? Is once you've established that this thing that doesn't exist does, then you can build quote unquote real science around it. And I don't understand half of any of that real science. While we were reading this book, I would message you and you would talk to me about like fucking things that still blow my mind about photons that I just don't understand at all. I don't get it. Like, because I think one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how I had to admit to you while I was reading this book, where I was like, Matt, I don't get time dilation. And it's not that I don't understand it conceptually, right? It's like you're traveling faster and therefore time is moving slower for you. Like I can say that and I can know what that means relatively, but I like, if you ask me to be like, okay, but why that happened though?
Yeah,
How time moved different for you, me,
right.
don't get. Um, and that's like that's one of the things that's fun. Like I don't understand all this stuff, but I understand it enough, right? Enough.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, I kind of enjoyed that when he meets Rocky, Rocky also doesn't understand time dilation. And like he has to explain. I love that he's like trying to explain time dilation and Lorentz contractions, and Rocky just doesn't believe him. Like that. It's like, no, that can't be right. That doesn't make that's nonsense. Time is time. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I'm with Rocky on this, and Kirk is saying because light moves at a constant speed regardless of reference. I know, but like time is time. How
yeah,
time not time?
but see that's the funny thing is just because somebody says light moves at a constant speed regardless of reference frame doesn't mean you intuitively make the leap toward like Lorentz contraction where the distance ahead of you appears to shrink and like all these other things where basically everything in the universe warps itself in incredibly ridiculous ways so that from your perspective light is moving at the same speed in all directions. That's that, and it's like why? It's like what? Well, that it just does. Okay, that's the rule. um,
This is why people think we live in a simulation, because you look at the stuff and you're just like, none of this makes sense. Why did
yeah,
it? Why is this way?
I still don't understand why uh, there's causality violation if you go faster than light. Like I've never managed to fit the entire explanation for that in my head. But luckily, it doesn't matter because in this book they never go faster than light.
Yeah, they just go, kind of close, just close. Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's use this to kind of talk about the flashback sequences as a whole.
sure.
So basically, the structure of this book is that we meet this guy. He's kind of an amnesiac, and he assumes at the beginning that it's just a side effect of the coma that he was put under in order to travel this great distance. We learn a little bit later in the book that it's a little bit more complicated than that, but we are being treated to his rememberings as flashbacks, and so one of the things that structure naturally does is allow a flashback to have a key bit of information that our character needs in the moment to solve a problem. It's a natural kind of bridge between those two things, which is like this is what the purpose that flashbacks should solve generally. Like if you're writing something, a general rule of writing is a flashback should relate in some way to the present situation, like, right, like, or else why are you flashing back? It should have something to do with the present situation that's going on. And so Andy Weir has kind of built a perfect reason system in for that he's trying to solve a problem and he's flashing back to information that he learned before the coma that will help him solve that particular problem. What did you think of the overall structural conceit of that kind of system?
You know what? I think it worked for me overall. I know that there's some people for whom it didn't really, and I can understand that. I don't feel a need to defend the way the flashbacks were done because I think sometimes it bleeds kind of momentum from what's happening in the main plot line. I never really. I think maybe one of the biggest weaknesses is that I didn't really like or care about Strat, and I didn't really feel too much about his relationship with Strat, and that felt kind of like if you were gonna make a movie out of this or whatever, then you would really try to make sure that that relationship was something really solid and load bearing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although I mean you could say like, hey, isn't it interesting that he has a more human relationship with this rock dude? than he does with Strat, the actual human. I don't know, whatever. Um, Structurally, I think this is one of the tricks that he employs to help us along with our puzzle solving, because what will happen is you'll be like, oh, how am I gonna solve this problem? And then you get the flashback, and while the flashback is happening, you're getting the information that you need to solve the problem. But he's not solving the problem for you. You're just seeing the information, and then that gives you the chance to be like, okay, okay, all right, okay, and then you like put it together, and then by the time you get back to the present, he solves the problem.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the trick, and it's a very effective trick to like give you that space to figure things out.
Yeah.
Um, and he's doing a lot of stuff with the flashbacks, by the way. Like there, there's a lot, like most of the characters in the book are in the flashbacks. So I would never say like, oh, you can just do without the flashbacks. They're not important. Like no, I think they're actually really important to what the book's doing. I just felt them to be a little slow, and I kind of wanted to get back to what was going on the Hail Mary a lot of the time. How'd you feel?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with you. I think they work best at the beginning of the book, as he has the biggest blank spots in his head, and then I think actually they kind of wear out their welcome as the book progresses, and I found myself less and less interested in them as we went along. I will say the one big exception to that is the reveal that he did not volunteer for this mission, which I know is a slide that we're going to get to in a bit. I think that's the one exception to everything I'm saying here. But it's just like, it's a type of structural conceit, I think, that you come up with in your book that like starts off really strong just by the nature of that structure, because at the beginning of the book we know nothing, and so every flashback is packed full of information for us to learn, like not just about the astrophage and not just about the problem, but also who this guy is and why he's here and what was going on. And so like the flashback sequences are very, very propulsive early in the book, and then the more we learn about Grace and the more we learn about the astrophage and the more we learn about the mission, they just kind of start lacking that propulsion for me. um I will say that there's also some stuff introduced in them that I'm not sure what Wier was trying to do with, and maybe that's a great conversation to have here with all these people. We can try to solve that. But like, one of the biggest things to me, specifically to Strat, was how often the book kind of pauses the story to talk about how she is just like granted this like unilateral power to do whatever she wants to solve this problem. And like there's a moment, like there's a whole courtroom scene we see with her where people are being like, hey, like you can't just take all our stuff, like it's our stuff, you can't just take it, we're gonna sue you. And she's like, no you're not, haha. And I was like, okay, like, so what is Weird doing with this conversation around unlimited power in Crisis, right? Is he trying to say, this is a good necessary thing that we need? Is he trying to say, I don't know how I feel about this? Or is he not saying anything at all? In which case, I wonder why we spent as much time on this as we did.
Right. I don't know either. I agree, because it seems like a straightforward reading of the book would suggest there's no way that they get the Hail Mary launched in the time frame that they need to launch it without her basically being a world dictator who is
Mm-hmm.
able to just commandeer all these resources and, you know, basically sacrifice lives toward that goal, because there are deaths that happen in the flashback timeline, and then she press gangs Grace into, as we're going to talk about, into service, and
Mm-hmm.
and like and then of course it's like her decision to do that is basically justified because he's the only one who survives and he's the one who solves the problem, right? So if you stand, if you do the thing where you say like, all right, let's pretend, let's read this as a morality tale, is the morality tale saying like, sometimes you have to seize control to do what's right? I don't know. I don't know if it. For some reason, I just don't feel like that's a message that hangs together with like the rest of what the story is doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's my big problem with it too. Luke is saying that sequence in particular, the courtroom, is about how IP law, kind of can stand in the way of science and progress. That like the idea of ownership of intellectual property can stand in the way of progress. And I think that's an interesting point, and has some validity to it. I feel like the way that sequence is framed, though, Strat comes off seeming like a dick about it. Like she just came all the way to the courtroom, which is one thing Chris is saying here. It almost contradicts her character that she took time out of her day to come to this courtroom and like make this big show of how I don't actually have to listen to any of y'all. You have no power over me. Haha, fuck you. I'm out. I'm doing my shit. Like I don't know if, again, this is one of those things that I don't know if my personal feeling toward things is getting in the way of what the book was intending to do, but it felt to me like I shouldn't feel great about Strat coming out of that scene. And
Yeah.
so if the point is kind of demonstrating the ways in which IP law can get in the way of progress, then I don't think that accomplished that goal by the way that it framed the character that was tossing IP law out the window.
Yeah, I mean that was the one. That was the one moment where she felt the most like Rick Sanchez. Just imagine her like walking out of the courtroom with her middle fingers up, like,
Yeah.
and like kind of glorying in the power. And I don't know, like, okay, so there's a slide a little bit further on that I think it's very short. I've actually been having a lot of interactions in the Discord where I'm sort of taking this stance that I thought the book was gesturing toward with this one scene that I'm foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but nobody else seems to agree with me. So we'll see. Maybe we can just pause until we get there, or we can skip ahead. We can do whatever the hell we want, Scott.
Yeah, let's skip ahead. This is one thing, folks. Like we've been doing book club for like 5 years now, and I think we're at the point now where we're starting to wonder: does this rigid pull slides read every word of the slide, then talk about that particular thing? Does that make sense to do anymore? And we're starting to think maybe we could be a lot more flexible. This is kind of a result of last month book us just going, hey, this is kind of a short book. We didn't pull very many slides. Let's just have a free flowing conversation. And me, I don't know about y'all listening, but I enjoyed that format a
Hmm.
lot better. And I don't want to be, I don't want to have to say, well, let's hold off on talking about this till we get to that slide, because I,
Yeah,
I want the conversation to flow naturally. So all that being said, Matt, let's go to that slide,
yeah. That's
which
slide eight.
is slide
Slide eight.
8.
All right. So
No, it's not
so
this one. Yeah,
there's a conversation. I'm just going to read it since it's the one that I wanted to talk about.
sure.
It's a conversation where I keep wanting to say Mark Watney, where Grace is like, on Earth, and some other scientist comes. They're building these are the guys building the little beetle ships. They're gonna fly the message home, and he's coming to get some astrophage. He clapped. Hell yeah, astrophage coming my way. He leaned forward to me. Isn't it amazing? Astrophage, I mean, it's like the coolest thing ever. Again, God's just handing us the future. Cool, I said. It's an extinction level event. If anything, God's handing us the apocalypse. He shrugged. I mean, maybe a little. But man, perfect energy storage. Imagine a battery powered household. Like you have a double A battery, but full of astrophage that'll last your house about 100,000 years. Imagine buying a car and never having to charge it up. The entire concept of power grids is going to end. And it'll all be clean, renewable energy once we start breeding this stuff on the moon or something. All it needs is sunlight. Clean, renewable. I said, are you suggesting astrophage will be good for the environment? Because it won't be. Even if Hail Mary finds a solution, we're looking at a mass extinction. 20 years from now, a whole bunch of species on Earth will be extinct, and we're working hard to make sure humans aren't one of them. He waved off my comment. Earth's had 5 mass extinction events in the past, and humans are clever. We'll pull through. We'll starve, I said. Billions of people are going to starve. Nah, he said. We're already stockpiling food. We've got a bunch of methane in the air to hold in the solar energy. It'll be all right, as long as the Hail Mary succeeds. I just stared at him for a moment. You are, without a doubt, the most optimistic person I've ever met. He gave a double thumbs up. Thanks. Um, so here's my problem with this book, Scott. This optimistic guy isn't nearly optimistic enough. If you had this stuff, why would there be a climate crisis at all?
I don't
You
know.
could
I'm not
just
a scientist.
you could just use it to build giant like heaters, or you could just have like 7,000 little spaceships that fly around with giant mirrors and reflect the light onto the earth. You could do whatever you wanted because you now have basically infinite free energy, and like infinite extremely dense free energy that also comes along with the ability to make like a super laser. um which I think is funny because the whole book, aside from this one scene, doesn't ever consider, like, other than the idea of using the astrophage as a propulsion device, right? Doesn't consider like, okay, well, you never have to have another heater. You never have to, it can do everything. It's magic and it can do everything. And and that's really like the one moment in the book where like I honestly think Weir realizes all of that, and he's just kind of wants to have his plot about saving the Earth from the climate disaster. But see, the reason I wanted to rush ahead and talk about this is I think it ties back to this idea of Strat seizing power and unilaterally doing all this stuff and sending him on the suicide mission, because it's like, wait a minute, was this even necessary? Like, what, like, literally, was it even necessary to try to avert the astrophage dimming the sun, or could they have just engineered their way around it with the magical technology they were just given? Respond, everyone.
Well, I think this slide in particular, you are 100% correct in the fact that I think Andy Weir is a very intelligent person, and probably in the course of plotting out and planning this novel, all these things occurred to him as well. And he said, "I don't want the book to be about those things, but the engineer in me needs to at least lampshade them in some way in the book. So I'm going to throw this one character in that is the person thinking of all these things, but then we're going to move away from it." By the way, this is, I think, now that we're saying it, the exact same reason we have Strat like asserting her dominance on a world stage, because I think it's him as a very intelligent thinker acknowledging the fact that for all this stuff to happen, it needs probably, you know, like unilateral immediate decision making and thinking, and so he has to include that, because it would feel fake to him to not at least include that in his book. And so he makes the Strat character who can just do all those things, and establishes that she can just do whatever she wants. Yeah, I mean, I think this is not the story he wants to tell. I don't know enough about any of this, how any of this stuff works, or, you know, what, or be able to build any kind of prediction modeling to see like how humanity would actually react with this stuff. I certainly think there would be a bunch of, you know, businesses and people out there that would abuse it to make a whole lot of money, but I think there would also be a lot of just really cool ideas that would come out of it. Sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the thing is like, I don't know. It's fun to consider what would have happened if instead of some kind of centralized authority, there had just been like 10,000 different businesses that were formed trying to productize it. And, you know, 5 years later, it's like, oh, you just buy this little node and you like poke it in the middle of your crop field, and it just keeps the crops 3 degrees warmer than they would otherwise be, and it's astrophage powered, and then you're done.
Yeah, but like people are saying in chat, it's not infinite energy, right? It's energy. It's still solar energy. So the sun dying would, you know, be bad for that.
It's solar energy, but my understanding is, well, the sun's only going to dim by a few percent, was my understanding of the story, and and as long as you, like, the amount, it's not like it's a solar panel, it's capturing like 100% of the solar energy.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is, and then like the guy said, like, oh, well, you know, you make a station on the moon to harvest it, and to our mind it's like, oh, that's crazy, you're going to build a station on the moon. And it's like, well, you have astrophage, you can go to the moon really easily now, you know, you chain the things together and you realize. So anyway, this is none of this is in the book other than this one section right here. But like, I wanted to highlight this section in context of the conversation about Strat, because it's like, it changes the complexion of the whole thing for me, honestly, even though it was such a small piece of the story.
Sure, because you're a dork and you're immediately gonna do exactly what this guy's doing here. You are this character. Andy Weir wrote a character named Matt Freeman, and here he is right here.
I basically am, but then you do have to say, like, well, why would he put this in here if it wasn't something that was on his mind? And you know. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that.
I think that's fair.
My hobby horse.
I think that's totally fair. Yeah. So let's go back in time a little bit and let's talk about Rocky, because he's a huge part of this book, right?
Yes.
I have no idea whose slide this is. You read the last one, so I'm going to read this one. Human bodies must sleep. Sleep is this. I curl up into a ball and close my eyes in an overdramatic representation of sleep. I make a fake snoring sound because I'm a bad actor. I return to normal and point to his clock. Humans sleep for 29,000 seconds. Along with perfect memory, Iridians are extremely good at math. At least, Rocky is. As we work our way through scientific units, it became immediately apparent that he can convert from his units to mine in the blink of an eye, and he has no problem understanding base 10. Many seconds, he says. Why be still so many seconds? Question. Understand. He relaxes his limbs and they go limp. He curls up like a dead bug and remains motionless for a while. Iridian same. Music notes. Oh, thank God. I can't imagine explaining sleep to someone who had never heard of it. Hey, I'm going to fall unconscious and hallucinate for a while. By the way, I spend a third of my time doing this, and if I can't do it for a while, I go insane and eventually die. No need for concern. I added his word for sleep to the dictionary. I turn to leave. I'm going to sleep now. I'll come back in 29,000 seconds. I observe, he says. You observe? I observe. He wants to watch me sleep? In any other context, that would be creepy. But when you're studying a new life form, it's appropriate, I guess. I will be still for 29,000 seconds, I warn him. Many seconds. I will not do anything. I observe. Wait. So this is Rocky. I thought this was a great slide to kind of introduce the dynamic way in which Rocky and Grace interact with each other, which it takes up, honestly, the vast majority of this book, right? The most of the book is these two characters getting to know each other and interacting with each other and learning about each other and collectively trying to solve this great problem that is the book. And it's wonderful. It really is. Like, I liked the first bit of the book, but it really does take off here as soon as this character is introduced. Like, it really is like Andy Weir kind of like backdoored us into a First Contact story in a book that is not about that at all. And I thought that was really, really fascinating because, like, it's obvious, like, he's so fascinated, scientifically with the concept of what would it be like if you had two people from completely different planets that are built completely differently trying to learn how to communicate with each other. And he really spent a lot of time kind of crafting what this interaction would look like. It's not quite as complex and detailed as like Arrival, for instance, right? But it is still so fun, and their interactions are so fun. And Rocky, like, because I think he has Weir's voice, but I think also because he has Grace's voice, he's just a very fun character. His sense of humor is really great. You really get an understanding of this rock monster. I loved Rocky. I loved him.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a decision that he made, to say Rocky, despite the fact that he's a rock spider thing, is just a silly dude. Just he's very much like our Grace character. Mm-hmm. His species, they have a couple of quirky habits, like watching people sleep, and they live a long time, and but like, other than that, he's basically a person. His mind works relatively similarly to ours, although maybe he can do math faster, and there are things that we can do better, and whatever, and like, overall, he's just delightful. And I think this is the strongest part of the book, actually, is Rocky and the relationship with Rocky, and that becoming so important to Grace that he's willing to risk sacrificing the earth for his friend Rocky, which I don't I think that's a very kind of intentional thing we're saying about this character, because he's this character who started out, I think, fairly selfish, actually, and he changes over the course of the story.
Yeah, you're right. I think that is an interesting note, though, because he does start off as extremely selfish, but we don't actually learn that until a good ways into the book, till the big reveal that, oh, he didn't actually volunteer for this thing. He was kind of forced into this, kidnapped into this, and it really reframes and recontextualizes a lot of what you've seen before. Of course, that moment comes in just in time for him to make his character change, where he makes that different decision at the end and does turn back and save Rocky, potentially, or at least in his mind, definitely sacrificing his own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess before we talk about Rocky more, which I want to do, I guess what did you think of holding the reveal of his selfishness so far into the book? Did that hurt your understanding of his character at all?
No, I think I liked it, because he's thinking of himself. I, I mean, it's complicated, right? He's giving himself credit for being, the hero, and the one who's willing to sacrifice himself for the earth, and then he realizes, like, oh, that's not actually who I am. I'm actually a coward.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's great, what's kind of great, is like, then past that point in the story, he is anything but a coward. He's doing all kinds of incredibly brave things, but it takes him a while to kind of realize he's not a coward. And I like that. I liked all that stuff. I don't know. Did you like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works because you're absolutely right. This is not necessarily a story about, uh, on the surface, about a coward learning how not to be cowardly. It's about a hero learning, oh, I was cowardly before, and having to process that information. I think it's honestly one of my favorite reveals of the book is, and we can just move over to the slide and we'll come back. We'll come back to Rocky. But just this idea is one of my favorite, like, last minute reveals of the book, because it comes at a point where you think you've got the book pretty nailed down, right? Like, he's on this mission. We don't I guess the one big mystery that the flashbacks hadn't solved yet is how it became him. And then, like, this great tragedy happens where the two people, the first choice and their alternate, are both blown up in a horrible lab accident, and you're like, oh, okay, so the book has already established the fact that he's one of the people with the rare DNA mutation that allows him to do this long coma thing, and we just lost the people. So your brain automatically connects those things and go, oh, so this is when he steps up, this is when he volunteers. And then you go through this thing and it's like, no. And you're just like, what? Because it is not in line with the guy that you've seen throughout the rest of the story, right? Because he's been so active and so problem, and, like, trying to solve the problem, and so invested in solving the problem. And then you're just like, what? You no? Like,
Yeah.
and like, I think it's type of thing that it works really effectively when you're armchair quarterbacking the book, because it's very easy for us sitting here in the comfort of our home reading a book to say, of course I would volunteer for that mission. Of course I would do that. It's the fate of the planet. It's the fate of humanity. But then, of course, like, being in that situation and actually being presented with that situation is something very, very different. And so it's shocking and alarming. And it does allow you to kind of recontextualize the character as you've known him throughout the story. Like, we've seen him as a guy who wrote this paper about non-water based life forms, and the book kind of proves him wrong mostly. And then him being, like, wildly defensive about that, it recontextualizes his, like, like, being the cool teacher. I love when Strat just kind of calls him out on all these things and is just like, to his face, like, look, you're using teaching as a way of hiding from the world because you wrote a paper and you were pissed off about something. You wrote an angry paper and people got mad at you, and you just, like, retreated from the world. It's such a fascinating twist on a character that I really thought we had handled at that point in the story.
Yeah, no, it's true, because it totally changes the perception from, like, okay, this is a go-getter, this is a proactive, dynamic guy who's
Mm-hmm.
going to go out there and do what it takes to solve the problem. And it's like, actually, he has always fled from solving the problem, and it's only because now his back is up against the wall and he has to do this to survive that we're actually going to see what he's made of. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
great.
It's great. It's wonderful. And then, of course, the culmination is that moment of turning back and sacrificing his own life to save his friend.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think what Luke says here is, what we wouldn't do for humanity, we would do for a friend, right?
yeah,
That's kind of the our brains are actually, like, really, really bad at handling groups of people beyond, a few dozen, right? Like, we're evolved as tribal animals. We have our circles, and some people are better. Not every human's the same, right? Some people are better at broader empathy than others, but, like, the idea of you make it real for you by making it one individual you care about, and suddenly that seems much more obvious and pressing. Like I think there's nothing I wouldn't do for my family, right? Like and my close friends. Like there's nothing. It wouldn't even be a question. But yeah, like like the humanity is such a broad concept that
Yeah.
it's like I don't even know what that means actually.
Right. And when he decides that he's going to sacrifice his life to save Rocky, he's also saving Rocky's entire species, right?
True. Yeah.
But he doesn't. That's not really why he's doing it.
Mhm.
It's because of his friend Rocky
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's that's kind of like a net positive effect of individual concern is like that's kind of the whole idea of civilization, right? Is hopefully the general care about your specific group of people results in a overall net positive for civilization as a whole, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
The Trinkard says, on a reread, seeing more of what Strat calls him out on each flashback instead of being stuck in his point of view. That's great. Yeah, I think that would be a fun thing to do on a reread of this book, is pay more attention to the flashbacks and how we're kind of seeing them through his point of view, and how maybe there's a little bit of protagonist blinders there.
Yeah.
And see the flaws in him a little bit more clearly now that you know them. Yeah, I like
Right. And maybe also just like my complaint about finding Strat to be kind of flat. It's like, well, if you know what this is building toward, then maybe Strat's personality reads a little bit differently
Yeah.
on a second read.
Well, and maybe subconsciously he's tossing some shade at Strat because he's angry with her at what she did to him.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
I think it's so funny that like the thing he's most angry about is like, fuck, she was right. She's gonna do this thing and she's gonna put me in this coma and then give me this thing that's gonna make me lose my memory of this entire conversation. And she predicted that I would wake up and just get to work, and she's fucking right, and I hate her for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
It is really great. So anything else you want to talk about Rocky? We kind of jumped over that slide to jump over to this one, but I just once again, like, it's funny that he is also built as like a problem solver character in a similar way to Grace, but Andy Weir kind of has fun with this because Grace is the scientist, Rocky is kind of the engineer, right? So they get to both be problem solvers, but problem solvers with a different set of skills, and it's kind of fun to see how those two sets of skills mesh in really interesting ways. That is some of the most fun of like, oh, I can solve this problem if you just solve this part. It's really great.
Yeah, you got like a Spock, Scotty dynamic or something going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
I do think that Rocky is just very, very well done in all sorts of different ways. Like there's something to me, there's something like perfectly heartstring tugging about the idea of like a sort of a character who, for whatever reason, can't express their emotions in the normal ways, telling a story that is incredibly heartbreaking, where like he's telling the story of all of his shipmates dying one by one,
Yeah,
and not
yeah.
understanding why, and then like desperately trying to stop it from happening, and not understanding, not knowing anything about cosmic rays, and then they all die, and he's the only one, and then him being alone for like what it's like years, right?
Yeah, years
Um,
and years. I think like a
and
decade, right? Something absurd.
yeah, I thought maybe it was decades, but I'm not sure. And and then like there's something to me, I don't know if it's just like me or if this is a thing with everybody, but like you tell that story kind of through the voice of a character who is clearly suffering enormously, but like they can't communicate it because they're a weird alien.
Mm-hmm.
And for me it just hits even harder. I don't know what that is exactly, but it works on me really well.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's something like endearingly childish about him in the ways that he doesn't understand things that I think Weir uses to its full extent. But then also he's like this incredibly intelligent, gifted problem solver as well. It's kind of a having your cake and eating it too situation, where you get to build like the remarkable thing about Rocky is he could have just been a plot device, right? Like we needed. a plot device in many ways. Like we needed someone to come in and help Grace solve the problem. We needed, as people are pointing out in chat right now, we needed the magic xenonite that is just this magic material that's just awesome, and it just does you can just make it, and it does whatever you want, and it's great and awesome and wonderful. We needed that, and we needed kind of someone to be there to help our character explain basic things to us, the reader, that, you know, and it's interesting the way Wier does this, because he's all right having his character just be explaining stuff that he already knows to the book a lot of the times, but then I think sometimes Wier is aware that like you're pushing it a little bit too far, and then so he invents this other character to kind of have someone there to explain things to in a way that feels more natural, and it's not just the character talking aloud or explaining things for no reason just because he can. So like it's very functional on a plot level, but yeah, then he also builds in a lot of character into this guy, and it is really sad having him, like, just the idea of inexplicably everyone's dying and you don't understand why, and you really can't even communicate how that feels. And I love this character. I think he's great, so much.
Yeah, some of my favorite moments in the story are like not plot central at all, where it's just like the two of them hanging out, or like trying to figure out something related to their like first contact communication issue, which I guess you could argue is central to the plot, but like it's sort of a tangent. It's sort of a you know, side path, right? But Wier takes so much time having fun exploring it. Like I love one of my favorite kind of things that happened was Rocky makes all of these different tiles in the wall that they're supposed to talk through, and then Grace picks one of them out, and then he makes the whole wall out of that material. And then like much later, it's revisited, and Rocky is like, "Wait a second, you can see through the wall."
Yeah.
And it's great because like the idea that he can detect light is just this shocking thing to him. And then, you know, a separate one where they're like, "Why can we both hear in the same frequency range?" And Rocky's like, "That's the sound of a predator approaching, regardless of what planet you're on."
It's great. It's great. Yeah, and I agree. Like, the thing that I love so much about the choosing the wall tiles thing is that Grace didn't even realize he was choosing a wall tile. He was just most interested in the one he could see through, because he couldn't see through the rest of them. And so yeah, it's this way in which this kind of miscommunication constantly happens in ways that work out, because like it's just the two people bumbling through first contact communication with each other, where they don't even realize they're like they don't realize necessarily what they're communicating, but they still are communicating.
No, it's kind of a wonderful statement about like how communication is almost easy when you have like earnest, good-hearted people on both sides of the exchange. They're like if you're both reaching toward each other, then you're going to touch fingertips sooner.
You're right, because like the thing that makes this whole thing work is both characters have just this innate endearing, genial curiosity about each other, where like you could build this whole thing where this first contact is filled with mistrust and doubt and concern about, you know, what this other person is and what they want, you know, and that's not what it is at all. And I think it's because they're scientists and engineers, right? There's no political motivation here. There's no underlying thing. It's just two people that love solving problems, and they look at meeting another alien race as just another problem to solve. Like, oh, how do we communicate with this person? Oh, that's just another science and engineering problem to solve. Let's get to it. And they just do it so benevolently. It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. I think that's what makes it work. Because you could have had a section mixed in here where Grace is for a moment concerned about, you know, the ulterior motives of the alien race that he's meeting with, but it just isn't necessary for this book, and I'm so glad it's not in here.
Yeah, like there was a moment when I imagined like, oh, I bet, you know, intelligence agencies on Earth are going to be so mad that he just gave the aliens all of our scientific knowledge. But he didn't even think twice about it, obviously. He's like, of course I did.
Just we have every bit of written communication that has ever existed on Earth, and here you go. Here's all of it.
Yeah, it's great. I like that, Nandy. That Nandy says, I feel like both this and The Martian are love letters to humanity's capacity to communicate as its greatest strength. Um,
I love that. Yeah, especially since we also bungle communication so much, but it is an incredibly powerful tool when used correctly.
yeah. Also, Luke points out that there is a moment where he actually thinks to himself, I have to assume friendly intent because basically, if it's not friendly intent, I'll just die. So,
Yeah, but I don't know how many people out there would come to that same conclusion. I don't know, maybe more than I'm giving them credit for, but
I don't know. I agree. Like that's the delightful thing about both of these characters is that they're both willing to just act in good faith,
mm-hmm.
and then that works out because they both are doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's get to the end of the book here, Matt.
Okay.
Is this my slide or yours? I don't even remember
I
anymore.
think you read the last one, so
Okay,
I'll just read this.
go for it.
I hobble out of the room and make my way along the perimeter of the dome. They made the whole thing out of clear xenonite because they thought that's what I would want. But it doesn't matter. It's pitch dark outside all the time. Sure, I can shine a flashlight out there and occasionally see an Iridian going about his business, but I don't get sweeping vistas of mountains or anything, just inky blackness. My smile fades a little. How bad did it get back on Earth? Did they work together to survive, or did millions die in wars and famine? They were able to collect the beetles, read my information, and implement a solution that would have involved a probe going to Venus. There's definitely some advanced infrastructure still there. I bet they did work together. Maybe it's just the childish optimist in me, but humanity can be pretty impressive when we put our minds to it. After all, everyone worked together to build the Hail Mary. That was no easy feat. I hold my head up high. Maybe I'll go home someday. Maybe I'll find out for sure. But not right now. Right now, I've got work to do. Scott, I'm going to cry. I continue along the path to the large double doors leading to another meeting space, and I have to say, it's my favorite one. I step into the chamber. About one-fifth of the room is my Earth environment. The other side of the divider wall has 30 little Iridians bouncing around like idiots. Each one is no more than 30 Earth years old. The selection process for which one gets to attend, well, again, Iridian culture is complicated. An Earth-like organ keyboard sits in the center of my area, oriented such that the operator faces the kids. The organ has quite a few more options than a typical keyboard found on Earth. I can apply inflection, tone, mood, and all the other little intricacies of spoken language. I settle into the comfortable chair, crack my knuckles, and start the class. All right, I play. Everyone settle down and get in your seats. They scamper to their assigned seats and sit quietly, ready for the lesson to begin. Who here can tell me the speed of light? 12 kids raise their claws.
Aww,
God, I love this book so much.
aww, what a wonderful ending.
You got to be a teacher again. That's all he
Yeah,
wanted.
and this time, not as an excuse to hide from the world, but as a way
Yeah,
to actually teach
yeah,
and do good work, and not just try to be the cool teacher, but actually just do something extremely important and teach people.
yeah, and cross-cultural exchange and make sure that
Mm-hmm.
the impression of the Iridians toward Earthlings is positive and all sorts of other positive things, right?
Yeah, I have to say, little uncomfortable by the concept of the me burgers. Little bit uncomfortable.
Um, I think I'm on the record as being okay with this idea.
I mean, is it cannibalism if you're eating yourself? No, I guess not. But
It's we're all sort of constantly eating ourselves if you think about it.
stop it. He's a humanitarian. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
Good.
That's good. That's very good. Yeah, no, I love this ending. I think there was some chats in the Discord earlier today and a few weeks ago about this ending and whether this was a regression or a culmination of this character's arc. I happen to think it was the latter. I think it's very, very fitting. It kind of brings everything together in a really wonderful way. And I don't know. It's like he gets to hang out with his friend. Like he's an old man by this point, isn't he? Like
Yeah,
he's years and
yeah,
years have gone by.
yeah. He's an old man and he's earned his rest. I mean, for me, like I can kind of understand what people were saying, but for me, it's like if Frodo flees and tries to return to the Shire after being told that he needs to go to Mount Doom, then that's fleeing from duty. That's
Mm-hmm.
cowardice. If Frodo decides to spend the rest of his life in the Shire and then go off to the Grey Havens at the end, after his duty has been done. That's not fleeing from anything. He's accomplished his goal. He's done what he needs to do. He has served his purpose. He has completed his arc.
Mm-hmm.
That is his well-deserved rest, right? And so for me, it's just like, yeah, this is his well-deserved rest. This is what he wanted. He accomplished the mission. Like, nice, tidy storytelling. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think you were right when you said, cross-cultural communication. Like he is teaching these people about humans and humanity. And frankly, based on how wonderful this character is, possibly one of the best people to teach an alien species about us. Someone who's kind of a relentless optimist when it comes to humanity. And I don't think he's going to shy away from explaining our worst tendencies, because we of course do have them. But I think it's a wonderful, happy ending. It was a great book to read. It made me very happy. I really liked it.
Yeah, what is the antonym to grimdark? Nandy asks. Whatever this is. Hail Marian.
Hail Marian. Did we say the Hail Mary full of grace thing that
No,
Andy Weir just thinks he's fucking hilarious, and the annoying thing is he's right.
Yeah. That's classic. I mean, that's the one thing where that just totally seems like a Mark Watney joke.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because it's an Andy Weir joke, of course.
You're right, Adam. I love Ted Lasso as well. It's another kind of relentlessly optimistic story. I don't want all my stories to have this level of like super optimism, but I certainly like reading stories like this every once in a while.
Yeah, especially when they're really well executed.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like it's one thing to be super optimistic, but it's also it's got some low points. It's got some drama. It's got everything. It's just a well done story.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, what is this that you put on our slide deck here?
This is what came up when I Googled Project Hail Mary. It came up the Project Hail Mary film in what's the word, in development, with directors attached, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and the starring Ryan Gosling. Who knows if this is real or if this has any chance of actually happening. I just wanted to throw this in here to talk about it.
I would say we need to look when the last bit of information was about this movie, because I know Phil Lord and Chris Miller are extremely busy and attach themselves to projects that don't end up happening all the time. So this would be great. Also written by Drew Goddard, who is a pretty good screenwriter that I happen to like a lot. So that's very exciting. I will say, since we're on the subject of a movie adaptation of this whole thing, how is Rocky gonna work in a movie? Because here's the thing: we're dumb humans. We're dumb humans that don't do very well with people that look slightly different from us, let alone giant spider rock thing. And so I'm wondering how a movie can get across how like endearing and wonderful this relationship is supposed to be in a personal kind of way, which is really key to what the story is doing.
A good voice actor is the answer to your question.
Okay. No, I think that's very fair. Yeah.
Like, because if you can get a romantic relationship between Joaquin Phoenix and the robotic voice of Scarlett Johansson, then I think you can give whatever personality you want to a pile of rocks as long as it has a good voice actor.
Yeah, people do love Groot, but Groot is adorable, and this is not like, how do you make, like, either they change it so much to they try to play up the adorableness, or they just have to. I don't know. I think it's a challenge. I think it's certainly a challenge, but not impossible.
Sure.
Ryan Gosling is starring as Rocky. That's great.
Ryan Gosling playing both characters.
Uh-huh. What if they cast Matt Damon as the voice of Rocky?
That'd be great.
How would that even work? Because he would just be singing and it's just translating, right?
It'd be the computer voice, right?
Sure. Okay.
You have to do it that way. There's no way you couldn't just have the like monotone computer translator voice. You have to have a voice actor or something.
Yeah. Tringard, that's a good point. He's referencing Everything Everywhere All at Once. Rocks with googly eyes are surprisingly emotive, so it is possible. Yeah, that's it. That's like the first interaction that Grace is going to have with Rocky is he's going to pull out some googly eyes and he's going to put it on Rocky. And then Boom, personified. All we need is a vague face shape to personify something, like we do it with cars all the time.
Yeah,
Uh, and
yeah,
so
that's true.
so we just need a vague face shape, and then we'll be good.
Did you ever think about what humans must look like to Rocky, since he basically we probably just look like translucent goo
Yeah, probably.
with bones floating in it.
Yeah, somewhere on that planet, they're having a conversation about their adaptation of this
Yeah,
and how it would like. I just don't think anyone's gonna be endeared to this gross pile of goo.
yeah. It's basically like a snail. It's basically like the creatures in the abyss.
Rocky complains about humans leaking. I love the detail of stuff like that. It's just so fun. It's so
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
All right, folks, we're nearing the end of the show. Is there anything else that we did not talk about that you wanted to talk about before we call it this? I will also say this is last call for the poll for next month. If you haven't voted yet, do it now, or or don't. And have you seen them eat? I love how our way of eating is gross, but Rocky's way of eating is like removing a plug and then shoving stuff. Ugh, ugh.
Yeah. Well, basically, like it's funny because his way of eating is basically taking a dump that you then replace with food. So basically, Grace is asking to watch him take a shit. Um,
Mm. It's a in the treatment phase. Okay, yeah, that's not even close. If they're still writing the treatment, we're not even close to a movie here.
yeah. Oh well.
Okay.
Oh
All right.
well.
All right, so we're gonna go and wrap things up here. Um, ooh, it actually, gosh, Matt, it was incredibly close here at the end.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, the Forever War gave the blade itself a run for its money, but I am closing the poll right now, and it looks like the blade itself is going to pull out the victory by 3 votes. 3 votes. So pretty close, pretty close. But so next month we will be reading The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I will make sure to have the post for that up on Monday. Actually, Monday's a holiday. Tuesday with all the details of that. But we will be meeting on Friday, September 30th. So that's 4 weeks from tonight. So you have that time to get the book and read it and then join us here. I bought this book, Matt, like 2 years ago with the intent of reading it. I never did. So I'm kind of glad I finally get to read it.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard about it for years and years and years. Never read anything by Joe Abercrombie though, so this will
I
be
haven't
a
either.
good experience, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, as Trinkard said, we're going from extreme optimism to to not very optimistic in the Blade itself. Which, again, you gotta read all kinds, right? You can't read the same flavor, the same type every time. So, yeah, so that's what we'll be doing next month. We will be reading The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Once again, Friday, September 30th at 9:30 p.m. We've got to run here. So we can't stick around and hang out with y'all. But just wanted to say here at the end of the show that this was a lot of fun. Also, I think we're gonna make the shows a little bit more flexible, like we talked about, right, Matt? I think
Yeah.
the one thing I want to do is we've been very stuck on this rigid, like, we read the entire slide's worth of information and then discuss it. And that results in like a third of these episodes being us just reading text out loud. And I don't know how much value that serves. I think there are definite passages we can read. Like we do that all the time on Kingslingers and did it all the time on We've Got Worm and Ward. Like sometimes reading stuff aloud and then talking about it just works. But it doesn't always need to be the case. And so I think we will probably continue to pull slides, but probably won't necessarily read the slide from top to bottom like we've been doing. So I think that's probably the change we're going to end up making.
I think that'll work.
Yeah. But thank you all so much. This was really fun. If you didn't tune in live, if you're listening to this after the fact, we hope you could join us next month on the 30th to tune in live. You guys were a great group. We really like it when we have people talking to us and conversing and a group discussion. We like that, and you guys
Yeah.
delivered.
Yeah, a lot of really great points, a lot of very good communication, which is the theme, of course. Yeah, so if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support the organization. At any level of support, you'll get access to the ability to vote for the books that we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. So go check it out.
That is right. And if you have any questions or comments, or just want to reach out to us to let us know your feedback on the kind of the proposed kind of changes we're making to the book club going forward, you can always find us at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia. But that's going to do it for us. We will see you next month for Joe Abercrombie's The Blade Itself. Every time I hear that last name, all I think is Abercrombie and Fitch, and I can't stop myself. So hopefully this book will bring a new Abercrombie into my life.
Yeah, right.
All right, folks, we'll see you next month. Yeah, so we're out on recording, but we're going to go ahead and shut the stream down, folks. Matt, are you doing okay?
Not particularly.
Yeah, Matt's got a bad headache, so we're gonna. That's kind of why we rushed the ending, because Matt was suffering there at the end. But we're gonna go ahead and go. We'll catch you later, though. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're out.